Are you ready to do good, feel good, and buy pie? Slice of Life, Food and Friends' annual Thanksgiving pie sale is back. It's the sweetest way and the easiest way to give back this holiday season. Every pie purchased provides one full day of free medically tailored meals to a neighbor living with serious illnesses like HIV, AIDS, or cancer. Order your pie by November 19th at sliceoflifedc.org. That's sliceoflifedc.org. Today on CityCast DC, we are talking about Mayor Bowser needing to woo Donald Trump. We're talking about Elon Musk maybe coming to DC, and we've got some news about the Bay Bridge. I'm here with Axios' Junaid Dil and my CityCast colleague Julia Karen. Today is Friday, November 15th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Junaid.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
Thank you guys for being here.
For sure.
Always a pleasure, Michael.
So, Junaid, you've been covering the transition, or at least the DC part of the transition. And one of the things you've been reporting on is Mayor Bowser wanting to talk to the incoming and former president, Donald Trump. Ordinary times, this is like kind of a pro forma meeting. You know, he takes a few minutes with the mayor of the city, which hosts the government. But this time, these two have some history. What's the story?
Well, yes, there is a lot of history.
I feel like history is putting it lightly, too, you know?
There's a lot of bad blood. But the mayor does want to meet with the president-elect Trump. I asked her if she would go to Mar-a-Lago. Specifically, I asked her that. But basically, she's made a request. She hasn't heard back yet. We're waiting on whether that meeting will happen before he gets into the White House. But sure, I mean, there's a dance that happens between mayors and the president-elects. There is the inauguration prep, and then there's just sort of coming to Washington and getting acquainted with the city, the fact that it's this district, that's a county, that's a city, that's kind of a state in its functions. And for Trump and his agenda, which is very anti-home rule for DC, the mayor has to thread this needle and try and explain why he shouldn't take over the city, basically.
Well, and look, there's about 800,000 jobs in the District of Columbia, and he is the boss of like a quarter of them, 200,000. So, you know, even if he was not an elected official, that's like a pretty important meeting for a chief executive to take.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it. This is a company town still in so many ways. The federal government's so important, not just even for directly people who are employed by it, but the contractors around it as well. A lot of the region flows from the federal government. And one thing the mayor does want is everyone to go back into the office all the time. And so you can imagine her wanting to talk to him about that. And also, what about this thing the Trump transition keeps talking about, which is getting 100,000 jobs out of DC and putting all those federal workers out of the region? That's a big problem for the mayor. She's going to have to talk to him and see how serious he is about that.
So I know that the first time that Trump got elected, Bowser and Trump had a meeting. How did that go? And is that like foreshadowing for kind of what's to come? Or do we think this will be like very different?
She went to Trump Tower, and maybe it kind of strains the imagination now, but in 2016, she went to Trump Tower in December, and that was about 2 years into her mayoral term. And such a different time. That was about a couple years after she stood for a groundbreaking with Trump at Trump Hotel in on Pennsylvania Avenue. And she kind of came out of that meeting saying, well, Trump cares about the district. And, you know, look, we even talked about metro funding, and we even talked about why DC is so important with the federal government. And that was a show of pragmatism by both sides. You know, even at that point, it was obvious they didn't have much in common, but they did have some things in common when it came to the Washington region.
When they first met at Trump Tower, he says, well, did Obama ever invite you to the Oval Office because
Mm-hmm.
he was very into showing up Obama, and she said,
Yeah.
well, I had a good relationship with him, and he said, no, but did he ever invite you to the Oval Office? And I guess the answer was no. And somebody made a note, and sure enough, she was invited to the Oval Office. Like, aha,
There you
gotcha,
go.
Obama.
One Oval Office meeting more than she's had with President Biden as well.
This is part of both of these people's, in theory, like professional core competence. He's a developer. He is good at working the local elected officials in whatever like town he wants to put up a thing in. And she's a mayor. She is good at working developers who might put up a thing in her town. So that was like the first time it was supposed to be all happy. But I think during the George Floyd protests, her signing off on turning 16th Street into like a Black Lives Matter mural was read by a lot of people, including him, as a middle finger at the White House. And it was, like there's this tradition in DC of like naming the street in front of some foreign government's embassy for like a dissident in that country
Yes.
or some way of like sticking it to that country. This time, DC did it to the White House. And he took it personally and has, in his, since being out of office, described DC as this crime-ridden, liberal-run hellhole that he's going to take away from the government.
I mean, some of these complaints are really specific. He talks about the medians and then the metal street lamps looking rusted and all these other kind of crazy comedic even things he's talked about DC being like run down apparently. But everything with Trump is like bombastic, right? And to what extent is he actually going to do some of these things? It's really hard to predict that. Obviously, what we can do is look at what he has said and what his allies have said. I think the biggest issue will come from Congress when it comes to home rule and intervention in DC. They're going to be the ones who can pick away at DC laws, who can pick away at regulations, who can find culture war issues, and they might be the driving force behind this. And Republicans, it looks like now, control both chambers of Congress.
So we were talking about this, when we talked about winning back Ted Leonsis, that sort of Bowser's superpower is like, like a lot of people would have taken the announcement that they're moving out of town and said, the hell with you, we've given you so much and this is how you treat us, boo. And she kind of kept it quiet and won him back and has, similarly developed some relationships with some of the right-wingers on the Hill, triangulating them against like the more liberal, strident members of DC Council. It's not a skill any political official really wants to have to use, but it's one that, I think if anybody can kind of talk the president into being nice to her, it might be her. I think you're right. It's different when it's his allies in Congress, and then he's going to not want to stand in their way because there's real allies.
Yeah, and she has built allies in Congress. James Comer, who is very adversarial to Democrats, seems to get along with her pretty well about RFK and all about different issues. So, yeah, I think she is pragmatic. I think she can sit down with Trump and walk back maybe some of the things he thinks he wants to do to DC. And they might, frankly agree on federal workers coming back to the office. It's not entirely clear to me how quickly he can actually move federal workers out of DC.
Back to the office thing. I know that there are union contracts in place with some of the federal workers, but those are different than maybe a lot of private sector unions. Like, what can he do on day one?
Well, it's good. It's a good question. He can bring back what's called Schedule F, which is this executive order that can reassign a lot of civil servants as basically fireable positions, strip away their employment protections. He could do that. Schedule F could apply to 50,000 federal workers.
What I meant was, like, what can he do about back to office? Can he just say, you're back, that's it, or you're fired?
I mean, I think so, right? I mean, the Biden administration's been telling agency heads to kind of do that already, like get more office time in, but it hasn't really been enforced. So what's stopping him from saying, all right, everyone in 5 days a week?
Yeah, this is a place where I think like our local news ecosystem is kind of weird, right? Because those of us who cover local news, right, the focus is intensely on like the potential encroachments on home rule, which are so, horrific symbolically and, morally. But I think like for a lot of civilians, people who aren't news obsessives or in the news business, a lot of people just think of their city government, whether they live in the District of Columbia or Rockville, Maryland or whatever, as like, they want their garbage picked up, they want their kids' schools to be okay, and they don't really think that much about how it all happens. I really think the bigger potential impact of Trump 2 is on work. And, I think it's so important to so many people in DC how they work, that they are, if you work in the federal workforce, you see yourself as a professional, a public servant, and an expert, and to be treated as like to either to be fired, obviously, but even if you're not fired, to be pushed around like a hack or a lackey, really changes like the meaning of the day for lots and lots and lots of people in a way that like local political media tends not to think about all the time because we're thinking about laws and practices. And I really do think like that's the much bigger long-term like change to DC in terms of how most people feel that Trump 2 could affect. I'm curious if you have a sense of whether like for Bowser or for anybody else, like is like protecting the jobs bigger part of the conversation than like protecting the home rule, or are they part of the same conversation, different conversations? I feel like that's going to be kind of a tension here and an interesting thing to look at.
In some ways, the home rule rollbacks, if there are any home rule rollbacks, they could be brought back just as, quickly, maybe in 4 years. In terms of federal government workers being moved out or fired entirely, that would take a much longer time to reestablish. And that might take precedent because that does power the economy. And I think some of that is morale as well and the vibes of living in this region. If you're depleting the federal government and you're plummeting the morale of all those people who love, going into their jobs and serving their country, that takes a really big toll. So there will be trade-offs, I guess, if you're the mayor, but protecting the federal government and what she calls the majesty of that being in the city and the region, that's got to be one of the most important things, if not the most important thing right now.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun. But with Christopher Nace and the trial lawyers at Paulson and Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson and Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the DC community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates, Samantha Peters, John Reese, and Maya Perry, handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson and Nace has even been recognized as one of Best Lawyers' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson and Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com or call 202-463-1999.
Having car problems? Well, with Rhoda, getting them fixed is as easy as ordering takeout. They'll come pick up your car for free, do any repair or maintenance needed, and return it right to your driveway. They'll even give you a complimentary video inspection of your car so you can see what needs to be done. Perfect for those of us that maybe aren't so car savvy. Book your appointment online at roda.com. And lucky for you, CityCast listeners get a 20% discount on any service for up to $100 off. Just use the code CityCast20.
So talking about jobs, the federal jobs and the hundreds of thousands of people who work them in this region, kind of segues into the second thing I was hoping we'd talk about today, which is Elon Musk coming to DC. And there's sort of two pieces of it. One is like, our town, for all of our familiarity with seeing like some senator out at dinner, takes a real Palookaville attitude towards anyone who got famous for any other reason than politics when they're in our midst. Like when Jeff Bezos was going to like become a man about town, it was like we were running around really excited, and that never happened. And now Musk is, spending a great deal of time around Trump. There's talk of him like sort of permanently or semi-permanently camping here, which means, you may well like see him in his dark MAGA hat jumping around town. But he also is going to be the point person on proposals, whether or not they're passed, to like really gut the lives and livelihoods of a lot of your neighbors. So it's kind of an interesting moment. How do you think he's going to be treated? Where will we be able to go to see Elon? You wrote about this too, Jim.
If anyone has any gossip on where he buys real estate, and I bet he will, just because everywhere he goes, he buys a lot of real estate. Austin, Texas is one example. Where he
Well, maybe Bezos will sell his house. He never uses it.
To Elon Musk. Yes, this is Elon Musk coming to Washington. And the thing with him is he doesn't play small. So now that he's getting involved in one of the biggest employers on planet Earth, we're going to have to brace for the startup, the quote demon mode, the Elon Musk of it all coming to DC and the federal government. And like the connection here is if he makes good on Trump's promises for the federal government, and that being the 100K jobs he wants to ship out, the efficiencies that he wants, the people he wants fired, that will have a huge impact to the DC economy. And in that way, he has immense sway over what the future of the Washington region economy will look like. This one person, this one guy who Axios co-founders this week called the most powerful civilian ever, and he now has Trump's ear on practically everything.
This might be like smaller fish to fry, but like Vivek Ramaswamy is also supposed to head this government efficiency task force that Elon Musk is supposed to be in charge of. Do we think Vivek Ramaswamy will have a similar impact, or is it just like the Elon show, period, end of story, we think?
I mean, there's sort of the word impact in two ways. Again,
Sure.
like, these people will have like a presence around town. They'll be like, ooh, I saw Vivek Ramaswamy at such and such. Mm-hmm. And it'll all feel a little bit cringy to me. But the actual like, impact, like in the sense of like, do they lead to significant numbers of our neighbors and, friends either losing their jobs or having the meaning of their work changed? There's a long history of people vowing to like, bring some business sense to the federal government and getting whooped by the system in the process. And, it turns out that a lot of the kind of nonsensical programs that Uncle Sam runs have like very powerful protectors within the federal government. Not all of those protectors are liberal Democrats. There's plenty of like conservative Republicans who represent like states that get ridiculous subsidies for random hard to defend stuff. So, I think a lot of old timers will say like, well, they'll bet on Washington beating back Elon and Vivek. I don't know, but that's one way of looking at it.
That's funny, actually. There's this old Washington versus this new sort of Elon Musk coming in that's going to shake out now. Musk thinks that this will send, quote, shockwaves through the system, which sounds wild. But as you say, there are entrenched interests and reasons why things are the way they are. So can he do what he did at Twitter, or is this more going to be a blue ribbon commission that sort of satisfies one campaign talking point? We'll see. Like, I feel like Musk doesn't go in for, blue ribbon commissions. I feel like he wants to actually do something, but...
Or even worse, is it going to be like a Fox News talk show? If you don't know that much about the government, you can kind of call and rant about all the waste and ridiculousness and, pretentiousness. And a lot of those rants are true. But like, even a blue ribbon commission like comes up with like specific proposals and, that can be bullet pointed and enumerated and, and then picked apart by their enemies. The kind of social media equivalent is a lot less coherent. Maybe that helps it get accomplished, but it's going to be different than that.
And just like one other thing here is like, if you talk to tech people and sort of business people, tech bros, if you will, they see defense spending, they see AI spending, chip spending, all coming out of the federal government, which is really thanks to the Biden administration. They got that rolling. That's going to probably continue through the Trump admin. And that will make DC a magnet for people like Musk, but people who are smaller fish, perhaps, who invest in tech and business and defense. And that will actually have a big impact for the region's economy as well. If you look at Nova, which is already prosperous with defense contractors and other things, just expect that to be supercharged. And I think Musk will be this sort of figurehead for these people who could rally around him, especially if he spends a lot of time in the region physically.
Yeah, I was going to say that was the expectation with Jeff Bezos when he, came in and bought the Post and also like has his Amazon HQ2 here. But it feels like this is vastly different? Like, do we think Elon's going to import more workers, which actually like juices DC's economy? Or is it just like, no, everybody out?
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like in Austin, for example, you had Musk going there, but he brought engineers and he brought all these staffers and he brought factories and things. I don't think like Chantilly or like the suburbs are going to get that effect, but I think you'll get a lot of people in policy and lobbying, in the business of influencing government, wanting a presence here because of the increase in defense and AI and chip spending and that sort of thing. And some of those people will flow through the Musk ecosystem, the Silicon Valley pipeline, if you will.
And I assume, just humans being what they are, that means they will develop a hangout and a culture and a sort of geography of their region, which will be, interesting to either hate watch or watch, depending on what your view of these things is.
Have you ever tried a squid ink margarita? What about a cotton candy old-fashioned? DC's bartenders are constantly raising the bar with wacky and delicious new cocktails. And what better way to try out their creations than during this year's Cocktail Week? This year's celebration is running Friday, November 29th through Thursday, December 5th, the 91st anniversary of Repeal Day. Whether you like a classic martini or a mixologist's strangest specials, DC Cocktail Week has something for everyone, with over 100 participating locations in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Warm your belly this fall with special happy hours and tasting events from some of DC's best restaurants. Visit DCCocktailWeek.com for details. That's DCCocktailWeek.com. Cheers.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
All right, so what we've been talking about so far may make you want to split town, like go to the beach. It's where our colleague Julia spends a lot of weekends over the summer.
I do.
And she drives there, as you probably do too, because there's no train. And she drives there over the Bay Bridge, and the Bay Bridge is going to look different. What's happening with it?
Okay. So people might know, like, the Bay Bridge is like this iconic bridge, right? It is the gateway to the beaches, to Dewey, to Rehoboth, to Ocean City, all of them. But the Bay Bridge is really old. Like, the infrastructure of it is kind of falling apart to the point that Maryland's Department of Transportation is basically like, we got to do something about this. We either have to fix it or we have to build an entirely new bridge or spans. And they are going with that second option, which is they're going to build new bridges to replace the current one.
Wait. It's from like 1960 or something.
Yes.
So it is 65 years old. Is that like the life expectancy of a bridge? That seems like, I think there's older bridges in the world, a lot of them.
There are. So basically what is wrong is their view is, one, it doesn't handle traffic as efficiently as it could. And the other thing about it is that when they looked at what it would take over the next 40 years to basically maintain the current spans, even though they're, from the 60s, it would cost about $3.8 billion over the next 40 years to pursue that no-build option. And over that next 40 years, right, that bridge turns 100 years old. You would probably have to replace that bridge anyways. So their view is, let's nip it in the bud, let's do it now, and let's figure out how to fund it. So here's what they're going to do, and here's what they're proposing. The new spans, the new 2 bridges that go towards the beach and away from the beaches, the rough cost estimate, get ready, is $7.3 billion to build 8 lanes across 2 structures. So 4 going in, 4 going out, and then $8.4 billion for 10 lanes. So 5 going in and 5 going out. So that is what they are thinking. They're thinking they're going to place it in roughly the same spot. They did all of these surveys and studies to try to figure out, okay, should we do multiple bridges that cross that bay? Should we move the bridge entirely to a different spot? Should we go under the bay and do a tunnel? And what they found actually was that spot is pretty good. What they want to do is build the bridges higher up because they want more ships to go under and get to the port of Baltimore, stuff like that. And this is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money.
When it's done, will you get to the beach faster?
I assume not. A lot of people have done studies about do expanding lanes on highways generally make things faster? And the short answer is not really. It doesn't really solve congestion. So that Friday evening or Saturday evening, whenever turnover day is, that will still probably be kind of heinous. And one thing that they have looked at in these surveys is, okay, if we're going to spend money on this, is there a way to get people there to the beach faster? One option that they have considered is like a bus-only lane. So right now, it is hard to get to the beach if you don't have a car. If you want to take the train, you take the train to Salisbury, Maryland. You still need a car or you need to take a bus. There are buses from Union Station and DuPont Circle, but they only run in season and they drop you off in Dewey. Those buses take roughly 3.5-ish, I would say, hours. And so what they want to do is expedite bus trips. They think that is the way that they're going to solve some of this congestion issue. So if you don't have a car, I would say be on the lookout to say, hey, I can take this bus. If the new bridge has these bus-only lanes that expedite travel for the buses, you could potentially get there without a car, which would be kind of nice and kind of convenient.
Julie, I have one question, though.
Sure.
With all the consulting and the studies and environmental reports being done, is anyone looking into the fear factor of crossing the Bay Bridge?
It's going to be even higher, you said.
It's going to be even higher. I heard that, right?
I imagine you can make a killing as someone who drives across the bridge and just takes people. I have family friends who are terrified of crossing this bridge. It's notorious for people who are scared of heights. One option that they had considered for people who were scared of heights was they thought about putting a ferry there, like a ferry from that base area to go across. And what the studies argue actually is that given the environmental impact of like you would have to have a ferry and the bridge, it's actually just better to only do the bridge and not have the ferry. The ferry actually would be slower, they think, and also eat up a lot of gas and be worse for the environment. They have to pass these Environmental Protection Agency standards.
For now.
But it turns out that like having that bridge there or just redoing that bridge is actually more environmentally efficient, although who knows, with the new government in place, they could say, you know what, maybe we do have a ferry there. Maybe we do put high-speed rail. Maybe we do put something. But for now, it is looking like they're going to get rid of the bridge over time. They're going to replace it with 2 new spans. But for now, I don't know. I'm still, content to drive across the Bay Bridge, have my friends close their eyes, and just pray that they get to the beach on time. That's my view.
Can I ask you one other question?
Sure.
Like about trains or buses, if they were to put in this bus lane or actually, God forbid, build a rail bridge, like in New York, there's like the Hamptons Jitney and people take trains out there. It's obviously a very different culture in New York where a lot of people don't have cars. Would this even be a thing people did? Or like once you get to Ocean City or Rehoboth, do you actually need a car?
I think the short answer is once you get there, you kind of actually need a car. Like there's that coastal highway that connects all of the towns. It goes like Rehoboth, Dewey, then Bethany, then Ocean City. And that span, you really kind of do need a car. There isn't like a public bus option that Delaware or Ocean City, Maryland provides to get you from those points. So you either have to Uber or you have to have a friend with a car. Anyways, you could bike them, but that is a far bike ride. You're going against people who are driving, 45, 50, 60 miles an hour. That seems kind of unsafe. So I think their view is, well, if you have to have cars there already and it's a car-centric place, let's make it easier for those cars to get there, unfortunately. So sorry, folks. Okay, so speaking of the Bay Bridge, if you're a fan of this podcast and you're listening to it to try to assuage your fears, or you read Kayla's newsletter, Hey DC, to try to take your eyes off the fact that you are hundreds of feet in the air, consider becoming a member. Very slick transition, I know. You get ad-free listening, you get early access to all of the events that we host, and also, you're contributing to local news, which is pretty sweet. All you got to do is head to membership.citycast.fm. It's $8 a month, which is way less than the projected $8 billion it will take to redo the Bay Bridge and get you on your nice vacation. So head to membership.citycast.fm and become a member today. Thanks so much.
Well, Julia, I'll talk to you soon.
See you, Mike.
Junaid, awesome to see you, man.
Great to see you as well.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Priyanka Tilve, Julia Karen, Ash Durbin, and Elizabeth Kama. Newsletter editor Kayla Cote-Stemmerman wrote our fabulous newsletter, Hey DC, this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not talk about it next time you cross the Bay Bridge? Shout it into the wind and everyone will hear you. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.